Drones have been a game changer in the war in Ukraine. Case in point, the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The fleet was getting decimated by Ukrainian sea drones to the point where it had to withdraw from the Ukrainian coast. Their departure made it clear the Ukrainian sea drone operators were good, maybe too good. Their rousing success left the sea drone operators and their crucial equipment with pretty much nothing to do. So they found a new target: aircraft and anti-air defense systems. By being retrofitted, the sea drones can now be used in seek and destroy missions on aircraft in operation rather than used purely for kamikaze strikes. Furthermore, with the machine gun loadout, the drone itself is much better protected than before and can disperse its destructive power across multiple fronts. The operation has already seen some success, as attacks in December 2024 and January of this year reported sea drones severely damaging or outright destroying several Russian helicopters and other defensive systems in the Black Sea area. But how did all this happen? How did Ukraine manage to repel Russia's fleet while having practically none of its own? And what's the secret behind the drone's success? Let's dive into Ukraine's drone navy. Let's begin with how Ukraine got to having no navy. Originally, the Ukrainian navy was primarily made from Soviet-era equipment that the country inherited from the Soviet Union. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine inherited a significant portion of the Soviet Black Sea Fleet, including numerous warships, submarines, and coastal infrastructure. However, the division of assets between Ukraine and Russia remained a contentious issue, with Russia maintaining significant control over the Black Sea Fleet, which had been headquartered in Sevastopol and Crimea. Despite agreements in the 1990s that granted Ukraine ownership of part of that fleet, much of the naval infrastructure and technical support remained under Russian influence, limiting Ukraine's ability to develop an independent and fully operational navy. By the early 2000s, Ukraine's naval forces suffered from chronic underfunding, outdated equipment and limited modernization efforts. Corruption, political instability, and a lack of strategic defense planning throughout the 2000s further weakened the Ukrainian navy. While Russia continued to strengthen its Black Sea Fleet, Ukraine struggled to maintain operational readiness. Efforts to modernize the navy were inconsistent, and by the time of the 2014 crisis, Ukraine's maritime forces were already in a vulnerable state. This was mainly propagated by the fact that the country's leadership was either entirely pro- or anti-Russian in different presidential terms, leading to somewhat contradictory actions, budget planning, and even reasoning as to why the country does or does not need a fleet in the first place. Then came March 2014. At the time, a decisive blow to Ukraine's naval power came when Russia annexed Crimea. With Sevastopol under Russian control, the vast majority of Ukraine's naval assets fell into Russian hands. Many Ukrainian warships were either captured or blockaded in ports. Ukrainian naval personnel stationed in Crimea faced immense pressure to defect, and a significant portion of the officers and sailors either switched allegiances or were forced to abandon their posts. Russian forces also seized key naval bases, shipyards, and coastal defense systems, leaving Ukraine with only a handful of operational vessels that had managed to escape. Following the annexation, Ukraine attempted to rebuild its navy, relocating its headquarters to Odessa and focusing on developing a smaller but more agile force. However, the loss of infrastructure, shipbuilding facilities, and experienced personnel posed significant challenges. The navy had to rely on Western military assistance, but any progress toward recreating the Ukrainian navy remained slow due to financial constraints and logistical difficulties. By the time of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Ukraine's naval capabilities were minimal, consisting mainly of patrol boats, coastal defense systems, and a small number of missile-equipped vessels. This meant that Ukraine entered the 2022 war at a severe maritime disadvantage. The country was forced to rely instead on asymmetrical warfare, coastal missile systems, and Western military aid to counter Russian naval superiority in the Black Sea. So when the conflict that started back in 2014 reignited into a full-blown war, Russia had a significant advantage, blocking off Ukraine's access to the coastal waters almost entirely. In the first few months of the war, the vital grain trade going out of the country almost ground to a halt. With the main trading routes across the Black Sea removed, Ukraine was forced to send ships hugging the coast of Romania, or even transport goods via road to Romania and then have them shipped from there. The resulting extension of trade routes was one of the major reasons that Ukraine had an economic crisis, as it relied on grain exports to gain funds that would help it wage war in the first place. Without any actual naval power to defend its waters, Ukraine turned to the few remaining resources it had, which it had been gaining en masse from its allies: drones. The battle for Ukraine was rapidly being modernized, and it was no longer traditional infantry that formed the bulk of troops on the front line. No, Ukraine leveraged unmanned vehicles in the air, on the ground, and at sea to eke out as much of an advantage as it could. And in 2022, the vital pieces of equipment that turned the tide of the war, literally, were the Sea Baby and the Magura drones. The Ukrainian Sea Baby drone represented a significant advancement in naval warfare, reflecting the country's innovative approach to countering maritime threats. Developed entirely domestically, the Sea Baby is an unmanned surface vessel, USV, designed for various strategic operations including surveillance, reconnaissance, and direct attacks on enemy targets. Its design focuses on stealth, agility, and versatility, enabling it to operate effectively in contested waters. The most recent iteration of the Sea Baby can reach speeds of up to 56 miles per hour, over 620 miles. It also packs 1,900 pounds of explosive power, according to Ukraine's State Security Service. The initial use case of the Sea Baby drone was to enhance Ukraine's naval capabilities in the Black Sea, particularly in response to the Russian Black Sea Fleet. By deploying these USVs, Ukraine conducted covert operations, gathered intelligence, and, when necessary, engaged enemy vessels or infrastructure with precision strikes. To that end, the Sea Baby was at first outfitted with high-quality cameras, guidance systems, and explosive charges. In its early stages, Ukraine would primarily focus on kamikaze strikes, using the drone to approach enemy ships as close as possible before detonating the charge. The Magura, on the other hand, was immediately designed for more flexibility and farther-reaching missions. Measuring 18 feet long and with a weight topping out at 2,200 pounds, the Magura has a range of 500 miles while carrying a 440-pound payload. Meanwhile, its battery life of approximately 60 hours means it can wait nearly as long as it needs to strike. By focusing more on stealth and maneuverability than sheer carrying capacity, the Maguras were meant to complement the destructive power of the Sea Babies. Where Sea Babies will conduct kamikaze strikes, the Magura will be used for covert operations. The integration of advanced technologies such as electro-optical infrared cameras, sensors, and communication systems equip the Sea Baby and Magura with the necessary tools to perform their multifaceted roles effectively. This allowed each drone to overcome the inherent disadvantage of fighting an enemy that had a quantitative advantage, as a drone needed to hit and damage a target to be of any use. The economic side of the Sea Drones' development is perhaps even more intriguing. The development of the Sea Baby and Magura involved significant innovation, leaps ahead of the drone technology present at the time, even in Western nations. Ukrainian engineers and military experts collaborated to create a platform that could be produced efficiently within Ukraine's existing industries. This approach ensured that the drones could be manufactured at scale, providing a cost-effective solution to bolster Ukraine's naval strength. By leveraging technology and equipment that was already in Ukraine and combining it with inexpensive construction materials, Ukraine had managed to revolutionize drone warfare by making it far cheaper than ever before. Compare the military drones of the early 2000s, such as the US-made MQ-1 Predator. While it had proven itself to be pivotal in the war on terror, conducting precision strikes and doing so without expending the drone itself, the MQ-1 was expensive. Its cost was estimated to be around $4 million per unit. In contrast, the simplest first-person view drones that carry a single piece of ordnance cost Ukraine only a few $1,000s at most. But for the Sea Drones to be as effective as they are, Ukraine had to open their wallets a bit more. In the Sea Baby's case, the cost is much higher due to its increased complexity, versatility, durability, and armaments. According to the Ukrainian government, the Sea Baby drone costs between $221,000 and $250,000. This is much higher than the $10,000 price tag for the average aerial drone, but is a drop in the bucket compared to the Predator. It's also a slightly higher cost than the Iranian Shahid 136 aerial long-distance kamikaze drones, at least for purchase. Note that the Shahid is only a kamikaze drone, while the Sea Babies started that way and became much more multifunctional as time went on. But whatever the cost of the drone may be, Ukrainians might agree that it was worth it. The impact of the Sea Baby was near immediate. In a series of coordinated operations, these drones targeted Russian naval assets and infrastructure, including oil platforms and warships. Notably, the Sea Baby USVs were used in conjunction with UAVs, aerial drones, to execute complex attacks, overwhelming Russian defenses and causing significant damage. These operations demonstrated the effectiveness of unmanned systems in modern naval warfare and highlighted Ukraine's capacity to innovate under pressure. The drones have also done some damage to Russia's military budget. Even when using the relatively high cost of the Sea Baby as the baseline, it's nothing compared to how much a Russian ship is worth, not to mention the crew and equipment on board. Each successful attack on a Russian ship only required a few of the drones, but the damage they dealt was massive. On October 29, 2022, Ukrainian forces launched a coordinated attack involving both aerial and sea drones on the Sevastopol naval base in Crimea. This operation targeted multiple Russian ships, including the frigate Admiral Makarov and the minesweeper Ivan Golubets. Reports indicate that at least one sea drone struck the Admiral Makarov, disabling its radar system. The Ivan Golubets also sustained damage during this assault. While the immediate physical damage to the vessels was reported as minimal, the psychological and strategic impact was substantial, leading to increased defensive measures and a more cautious operational posture by the Russian Navy in the region. In 2023, Ukraine intensified its maritime operations against the Russian Black Sea Fleet, employing innovative tactics and advanced weaponry to inflict significant damage on several Russian vessels. Here are just 3 such attacks. August 4, 2023. The Retrofitted-class landing ship Olenogorski Gornyak was seriously damaged near the port of Novorossiysk. A Ukrainian sea drone reportedly carrying a 450-kilogram explosive payload struck the vessel, causing it to list heavily as it was towed back to port. September 13, 2023. A coordinated missile strike targeted the Sevastopol shipyard in Crimea, resulting in substantial damage to the Retrofitted-class landing ship Minsk and the Kilo-class submarine Rostov-on-Don. The attack, utilizing Storm Shadow missiles launched from Ukrainian Su-24 bombers, led to fires and significant structural damage to both vessels. Open-source imagery and assessments indicated that the Minsk was almost certainly functionally destroyed, while the Rostov-on-Don suffered damage beyond economic repair. December 26, 2023. The large landing ship Novocherkassk was struck by Ukrainian air-launched cruise missiles while docked in Feodosia, Crimea. The attack caused multiple explosions and a fire aboard the vessel. Ukrainian sources claim the ship was destroyed and unlikely to return to service, while Russian authorities confirmed the damage and reported casualties. By the end of 2023, the impact of the Sea Baby and other unmanned platforms had compelled the Russian Black Sea Fleet to reconsider its presence and posturing in the region. Russia relocated a significant portion of its fleet from Sevastopol in Crimea to ports further east, such as Novorossiysk. This withdrawal underscored the effectiveness of Ukraine's maritime drone campaign and marked a pivotal shift in control over the Black Sea. Which brings us to 2024. The prevalence of drone warfare and the advancements in long-range tactics have led to Sea Babies practically running the show in the Black Sea. But unlike previous kamikaze attacks, the new and improved Sea Babies started getting a whole host of upgrades and armament replacements. The Ukrainian military decided to make the one-time use ordnance Plan B and outfitted the sea drones with mortar launchers, rocket launchers, and machine guns. This also led to the incorporation of more advanced targeting systems and logistics. A major factor in why the Sea Babies could actually be used for this purpose is their enormous range, which we mentioned earlier. Most drones that both Ukraine and Russia are using in day-to-day combat are short-range FPV drones that have ranges that top out at only several miles at most. Surveillance-optimized drones typically get an operational range in the dozens of miles at best, and some kamikaze drones can reliably hit targets 100 or so miles away, similar to a mid-range ballistic missile. In contrast, the Sea Baby and its companion sea drones can function at ranges between 500 and 620 miles away from the Ukrainian coast. This allows them to engage targets that would otherwise be somewhat safe from a land or air-based attack. It leads to a situation where Russians don't really have a great avenue of attack over sea. But apart from conducting attacks by itself, the Sea Baby leverages yet another capability of drone warfare that makes it much more frightening: intercompatibility. The sea drones that Ukraine uses technically don't need to carry armaments themselves. They can hold and transport other drones. A sea surface drone has more than enough carrying capacity to fit a few kamikaze drones on its hull. Then the large drone is used as a mobile relay, providing a network connection to the drones it's carrying. The system is similar to the one that debuted in aerial warfare. In particular, one of the advantages of using this strategy for sea drones might just be the extended range the Sea Baby can have. Based on the videos and the specifications that the flying motherships have, they can't really operate at distances further than 100 to 150 miles, which is where the 600-mile range of the sea drones comes into play. This extended range could result in an entire fleet of aerial drones being carried by the sea drone, being deployed entirely remotely, and then laying waste on vital Russian targets hundreds of miles beyond their usual engagement ranges. In a similar vein, the sea drones could be vital in removing Russian aerial and air defense assets. Apart from having practically no navy at the start of the war, Ukraine didn't really have much of an air force either. Until early 2024, the newest planes in the air fleet were the Soviet-era MiGs that were already likely past their obsolescence points. In 2024, Ukraine received donations of F-16s, which helped modernize the air force tremendously and also allowed it a much greater level of control over its own airspace. And yet, even without much of an air force, Russia failed to completely exercise air superiority over Ukraine. So how can this be? Well, there are a few reasons for that. From the fact that Ukraine already had solid anti-air defenses to begin with, which were only bolstered by Western donations, to Russian airplanes being too valuable to potentially get lost from return fire in Ukraine. Arguably, it's drone warfare again that evened out the score for the two countries. Aerial drones, even single-use ones, proved to be much more effective at creating areas of denial that the enemy was afraid of moving into. Interviews from the battlefront mention the buzz of drones overhead as one of the most dangerous and fear-inducing sounds in Russian soldiers. And sea drones only managed to make matters worse for Russia. By outfitting the drones with rocket launchers and large caliber and heavy machine guns, Ukraine gave the sea drones another lease of life as multi-purpose, high-mobility shoot-and-scoot units. The drones would glide on or close to the surface, with the waves and the currents making it more difficult for radar and tracking systems to spot their exact location. Then, once they're in range of the target, the onboard computer housing an automatic targeting system and a prediction-based guidance system allows them to be much more precise than humans ever could. Add to that the fact that the drones not only have long range but have extended loitering capabilities. This means that each drone doesn't just go to the target, shoot and return, it can perform reconnaissance and surveillance operations by roaming the sea. In essence, each drone behaves similarly to a small submarine in terms of operational capacity and functionality. Only unlike submarines, they are much harder to detect and target with conventional weaponry. The combination of range, loitering, advanced targeting, and the sheer range of armaments that these drones can carry at all times has made them threatening to practically every part of the Russian military. So long as something vital is on or near the coast, or even further away at sea, the Ukrainian sea drones have more than enough firepower to threaten them. Long-range strikes were considered the next logical step in the evolution of drone warfare. As of February 2025, this seems to have come to fruition. Both aerial and sea drones can devastate targets from afar, with minimal risk to the operator and, better yet, to the actual drone. By destroying ships and aircraft worth millions with drones that only cost a few $100,000, Ukraine has clawed back every advantage it possibly could in the war, and is well on its way to making Russia rethink its strategy of numerical superiority. Bear in mind that most of these drones are actually still in the experimentation phase. News reports that mention new developments in the field are practically working with data that is likely purposefully leaked or revealed to the public when breakthroughs are made. Even then, there's a high likelihood that Ukraine is keeping some of its most advanced systems under wraps. To illustrate that, we can look at the development of the Magura. The first mention of the system was in late 2022, when the Ukrainian military described it only as a potential project for a sea-based drone that focused on maneuverability and cross-operational use. The first Magura made its debut in July 2023 in Turkey, with the prototypes shown to already be fully operational systems rather than proofs of concept. This meant that Ukraine was already experimenting with using them at sea or had already used them in covert missions without reporting on the progress. There's no reason the same can't hold true for whatever new improvement the Ukrainian military and intelligence services have in stock for their trusty sea drones. Considering the sheer array of applications they could be suited for, there's only one main worry for their future. If they end up dominating the Black Sea altogether, they might truly run out of viable targets. But at that point, Ukraine will be well on its way to truly winning the war, and the drones' jobs will be done as intended. But what do you think? How likely is it that these sea drones will have a long-term impact on the war? Is this technology going to become the norm moving forward? Thanks for watching, and leave your comments below.